The stars in Sector 447 Gamma looked the same as any other sector in the galaxy. Cold, distant, and unremarkable. Commander Thexaval stood on the bridge of his survey vessel, staring at the final scan results with satisfaction. After 10 long years of mapping every corner of this remote region, his team had confirmed what the initial probes had suggested. Nothing, absolutely nothing of value existed here. "Commander, shall I transmit the final report to Imperial Command?" his communications officer asked, eager to finally leave this boring assignment behind. Thexval nodded, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence as his species always did when pleased. "Yes, mark this sector as cleared. No intelligent life, no strategic resources, no reason for the Empire to ever return here." He turned away from the viewing screen, already imagining his next assignment somewhere more interesting, perhaps near the core worlds where important things actually happened. Science Officer Krelith, however, remained at his station, his thin fingers moving across the control panel. Something bothered him, though he could not quite explain what. The scans were clean. Too clean, perhaps. In a decade of surveying, they had found exactly what they expected to find, with no surprises at all. Space was rarely that predictable. "Commander," Krelith said carefully, knowing his superior disliked questions after decisions were made, "I have noticed some unusual patterns in the electromagnetic readings from 3 months ago. They were very faint, but they appeared artificial." Thexval waved a dismissive hand. "Krelith, we have been over this. You found those anomalies, we investigated them, and they turned out to be natural stellar interference. This sector is empty. The Empire's most advanced sensors cannot be wrong." "Of course, Commander," Krelith replied, but he made a private note in his personal files. The readings still troubled him. The pattern had lasted exactly 4.7 seconds before disappearing completely. Natural phenomena did not usually stop that abruptly, but arguing with Thexval when his mind was made up would only damage his career. The Empire valued obedience more than curiosity. 300 light-years away in a system the Valorian Empire's maps showed as empty space, an entirely different conversation was taking place. Captain Daehyun stood in the command center of the UNS Indomitable, reading the decoded transmission from colonial intelligence with growing concern. The alien survey fleet that had been poking around the outer edges of human space for a decade was finally leaving. That should have been good news. Instead, it terrified him. "They think we are not here," Lieutenant Jiwon said, reading the same report over his shoulder. "Their scans completely missed us. The dampening fields worked perfectly." Daehyun nodded slowly, but his expression remained troubled. He was a tall man with gray streaks in his dark hair, evidence of 20 years in military service before Earth's unification. He had fought in the last wars between human nations, back when humanity's greatest enemies were themselves. Those experiences had taught him that hiding could only work for so long. "It worked this time," he said quietly, "but they will be back eventually. The galaxy is large but not infinite. One day we will have to show ourselves." Dr. Minho entered the command center, carrying a datapad filled with xenobiological analysis. He was younger than the captain, with an enthusiasm for alien life that sometimes seemed naive to the military officers. But his insights had proven valuable many times before. "Captain, I have been studying the alien transmissions we intercepted," Minho said, his eyes bright with excitement and worry in equal measure. "These Valorians are part of something much larger, an empire spanning thousands of star systems, 7 different alien species working together. Their technology is advanced, possibly more advanced than ours in some areas. But not all areas," Jiwon added with a slight smile. "They never detected our satellites, our colony stations, or our ships. Our stealth technology is clearly superior. Technology alone does not win wars," Daehyun said, a harsh edge to his voice that made both younger officers fall silent. "Numbers matter. Resources matter. If this empire decides humanity is a threat, we have 1 solar system with colonies. They have thousands. The math is not complicated." The command center grew quiet. Everyone present understood the reality. Humanity had hidden successfully for 200 years, ever since their long-range probes had first detected alien radio signals, and the United Nations had made the controversial decision to go dark. Every transmission was shielded. Every ship carried dampening technology. Every colony was built with concealment in mind. Earth's children had become the galaxy's ghosts, watching and learning while remaining unseen. But the strategy had always been temporary. You could not hide forever. Eventually, you had to make a choice about what kind of civilization you wanted to be. That choice was about to be forced upon them. Sir, we are receiving a priority transmission from Fleet Admiral Sujin, the communications officer announced. She is ordering the Indomitable to investigate anomalous activity at the edge of our defensive perimeter. A single alien vessel has crossed into the buffer zone. Daehyun felt his stomach tighten. The survey fleet? No, sir. This appears to be a different ship, smaller. It is moving slowly, as if searching for something. Ji-won was already at her tactical station, pulling up the sensor data. It is a scout vessel, Captain. Lightly armed. Only 30 crew members based on life sign readings. But its course will bring it within detection range of Colony Station 7 in approximately 6 days. The decision tree was simple and terrible. They could destroy the ship, but that would alert the Empire that something was here. They could try to redirect it using false sensor readings, but that was risky and might not work. Or they could do what humanity had been preparing for, planning for, and dreading for 2 centuries. They could make contact. What are your orders, Captain? Ji-won asked. Daehyun looked at the star map, at the tiny blue dot representing humanity's only colonized system, and at the vast orange expanse showing the estimated size of the Valorian Empire. David and Goliath, he thought. Except this time, David did not have a sling. He had stealth technology and 200 years of paranoid preparation. Maybe that would be enough. Prepare the ship for departure, he said finally. We intercept them before they reach the colony. And we send a message to Admiral Sujin. Tell her that after 200 years of hiding, humanity is about to introduce itself to the galaxy. Let us hope they are ready for us. Let us hope we are ready for them. The crew moved with practiced efficiency, preparing the Indomitable for its most important mission. In 3 hours they would depart. In 5 days they would reach the alien scout vessel. And then, for better or worse, humanity would step out of the shadows and into the light of galactic civilization. The only question was whether that light would welcome them or burn them to ash. The Valorian scout ship Eternal Glory drifted through what their maps insisted was empty space. Commander Thexval had thought his survey assignment was finally over, but Imperial Command had sent him one last mission. A faint energy signature had been detected from Sector 447 Gamma, and regulations required investigation before the sector could be officially closed. He had grumbled about it but obeyed. That was what good Imperial officers did. Now, staring at his sensor displays, Thexval felt his blood turn cold. This is impossible, he whispered. The screens showed dozens of artificial satellites orbiting a yellow star. Orbital stations hung in precise formations around several planets. Energy signatures blazed across the entire system, all clearly technological in origin. This was not some primitive civilization taking its first steps into space. This was an advanced society with infrastructure that would take centuries to build. And it existed in a sector that every scan had shown as lifeless. How did we miss this? Krelith asked, his voice shaking slightly. The science officer was frantically running diagnostics on every sensor system, trying to understand how such a massive failure could occur. The survey protocols are precise. We mapped every cubic meter of this sector. This should have been impossible to miss. Thexval felt his career crumbling. 10 years of work, all built on data that was apparently worthless. The Empire did not tolerate incompetence, especially not on this scale. But his personal concerns faded as he focused on a more immediate problem. If an advanced civilization existed here, hidden from Imperial sensors, what else could they do? Raise defensive shields, he ordered. Send a priority message to Imperial Command. Tell them we have discovered an unregistered civilization with apparent stealth capabilities. 3 light minutes away, the UNS Indomitable watched the alien ship's every move. Captain Daehyun stood calmly on his bridge, but his mind was racing through contingencies and scenarios. The Valorian vessel had reacted exactly as human analysts had predicted. Shock, confusion, and then a defensive posture. So far, everything was going according to plan. They are transmitting toward Empire space, Ji-won reported from her tactical station. Standard priority encoding. The message will reach their nearest outpost in approximately 70 hours. Plenty of time, Daehyun said. Minho, are we ready for contact? The science officer nodded, though his hands were trembling slightly as he prepared the first contact package. 200 years of preparation had led to this moment. Humanity had studied every piece of alien transmission they could intercept. They had built translation matrices based on mathematical principles. They had debated endlessly about how to present themselves to the galaxy, and now all that preparation would be tested. "The package is ready, Captain," Minho said. "Basic mathematics, physics constants, and a greeting protocol based on what we know of their language structure. If our analysis is correct, they should be able to understand our peaceful intentions. And if our analysis is wrong?" Daehyun asked. "Then we have bigger problems than a failed first contact," Ji-won said dryly, making several crew members smile despite the tension. Daehyun took a deep breath. "Deactivate stealth systems. All of them. I want them to see exactly what we are." The order sent a ripple of unease through the bridge crew. For 200 years, every human ship had operated under strict stealth protocols. Revealing themselves went against every instinct and regulation. But this moment required visibility. You could not shake hands while hiding in the shadows. On the bridge of the Eternal Glory, alarms suddenly screamed across every station. Krelith jerked back from his console as if it had burned him. "Commander, a vessel just appeared directly ahead of us. Distance 2,000 kilometers. Thexval spun toward the view screen and his four eyes widened in disbelief. Where empty space had existed seconds before, a massive warship now hung in the void like a predator revealing itself to prey. The design was unlike anything in Imperial records. Angular where Imperial ships were curved, dark where they preferred bright colors, and absolutely bristling with weapons ports. "Battle stations," Thexval shouted. "Charge weapons! Prepare evasive maneuvers." "Commander, wait!" Krelith called out urgently. "They are transmitting something." The view screen shifted to show a complex mathematical display. Prime numbers arranged in sequences, then basic physics equations. The speed of light, Planck's constant, universal gravitational constant. It was unmistakably a first contact protocol, exactly like the ones described in Imperial Academy textbooks. Thexval hesitated, his hand hovering over the weapons control. The ship before him was clearly powerful, possibly more powerful than his own. But it was not attacking. It was trying to communicate. "Respond using the standard Imperial greeting," he ordered finally. "And someone tell me how a ship that large simply appeared from nowhere." "Their stealth capabilities must be extraordinarily advanced," Krelith said, his scientific curiosity momentarily overcoming his fear. "To hide a vessel of that size from our sensors at such close range should be theoretically impossible." Yet they did it. On the Indomitable, Minho watched the alien response with growing excitement. "Captain, they are responding. The translation matrix is working. They are identifying themselves as representatives of the Valorian Empire and requesting our identification codes and homeworld coordinates." "That seems reasonable," Daehyun said carefully. "What is our response?" "That is where it gets complicated," Minho said, pulling up his analysis. "Their language includes hierarchical markers that suggest they expect us to provide this information as a form of submission. In their culture, the act of registering with the Empire is apparently standard procedure for newly discovered species." Ji-won looked up sharply from her station. "They want us to register? Like we are applying for citizenship?" "More like acknowledging their authority," Minho corrected. "From what I understand of their culture, the Empire sees itself as the rightful governors of the galaxy. Cooperation is expected, not negotiated." Daehyun felt anger flare in his chest but pushed it down. Getting emotional would not help. "Tell them we are willing to provide information, but only through equal exchange. We will share our identification if they share theirs. Make it clear we are not subordinates seeking registration." Minho worked quickly to encode the message, trying to maintain diplomatic courtesy while firmly establishing humanity's independence. It was a delicate balance, made more difficult by the cultural gap between species. When Thexval received the response, his confusion deepened. The unknown species was refusing standard protocols, not aggressively but clearly and firmly. In his entire career with the Imperial Survey Fleet, he had never encountered such a thing. Every species they discovered either joined the Empire willingly or was eventually convinced through economic and diplomatic pressure. Direct refusal of registration was unprecedented. "They seem to believe they are our equals," he said slowly, trying to process this strange development. "Perhaps they are. Krelith suggested quietly. Commander, they detected our arrival in the system before we detected them. They tracked us for days according to their transmission timestamps, while we had no idea they existed. Their stealth technology alone puts them at a significant tactical advantage. Thexval did not like hearing that, but he could not deny the logic. These unknowns had capabilities the Empire lacked. That made them dangerous. Or valuable, possibly both. Open a direct communication channel, he decided. I want to speak with their commander directly. No more text messages. If we are going to understand these people, we need actual conversation. Daehyun received the request and smiled slightly. Direct communication was risky, but it was also an opportunity. You learn more about someone in one conversation than in 100 carefully worded messages. Open the channel, he ordered. Let us see what we can learn from each other. The view screen flickered, and for the first time in human history, a person looked directly at an alien face. And an alien looked back. Both sides knew that everything was about to change. They just did not yet know if that change would lead to friendship or war. The communication channel established between the two ships carried more than just words and images. It carried the weight of two civilizations meeting for the first time, each trying to understand the other through a fog of cultural differences and mistranslation. Captain Daehyun studied the alien commander on his view screen. Thexval was tall and thin by human standards, with 4 eyes arranged vertically on his face and skin that shifted between blue and purple depending on the light. His expressions were impossible to read, which made negotiation extremely difficult. We are representatives of humanity, Daehyun said slowly, allowing the translation software time to process each word. We come in peace and hope to establish friendly relations with your empire. Thexval listened to the translation, his 4 eyes blinking in a pattern that Daehyun could not interpret. What the human did not know was that in Valorian culture, such a direct statement of peaceful intent was typically made only by weaker parties seeking protection. The stronger party did not need to emphasize peace because their power made threats unnecessary. Your peaceful intentions are acknowledged, Thexval responded, choosing his words carefully. However, regulations require all newly discovered species to provide their homeworld coordinates and submit to an official Empire registration process. This is standard procedure. Cooperation will ensure favorable trading status. On the Indomitable's bridge, Minho watched the translation scroll across his screen and felt his stomach tighten. Captain, there is a problem with the translation. The word he used that translated as cooperation can also mean compliance or obedience, depending on context. And favorable trading status might actually mean something closer to client-state relationship. Jiwan looked up from her tactical station. He is demanding we submit to their authority. We do not know that for certain, Daehyun cautioned, though his own suspicions aligned with Jiwan's interpretation. Their culture might simply have different diplomatic norms. We cannot assume hostility when ignorance is possible. He turned back to the view screen. Commander Thexval, humanity appreciates your offer, but we must respectfully decline to provide our homeworld location at this time. We propose instead a cultural and scientific exchange between our peoples, conducted on terms of mutual respect and equality. The translation reached Thexval, and his confusion deepened into concern. These humans were not just refusing standard procedures. They were explicitly demanding equal status with the Empire. Such demands usually came from species with significant military power or dangerous technologies. The fact that they had tracked his ship undetected for days suggested they might indeed possess such capabilities. I must consult with my science officer, Thexval said, temporarily muting the transmission. Krelith was already at his side, speaking urgently. Commander, I recommend extreme caution. We know nothing about these humans except that they have stealth technology far beyond our own. If we push too hard and they perceive it as a threat, we could trigger a conflict we are not prepared for. But if we show weakness, we dishonor the Empire, Thexval countered. Imperial procedure exists for good reasons. Every species must be catalogued and registered. Order must be maintained. Sometimes order must adapt to reality, Krelith said quietly. These humans are not some primitive species discovering fire. They have been watching us for years, perhaps decades. They know exactly what they are doing. Thexval considered this, then reactivated the communication channel. Captain Daehyun, I appreciate your position. However, you must understand that from our perspective, Refusing registration is highly irregular. The Empire has maintained peace in this galaxy for thousands of years through careful organization and cooperation. Your unwillingness to provide basic information raises concerning questions. As he spoke, Thexval made what he considered a reasonable gesture. He activated his ship's weapon systems not to fire, but to demonstrate readiness. In Valorian diplomatic tradition, displaying military preparedness during negotiations was a sign of seriousness and strength. It showed you were negotiating from a position of power, not weakness. The gesture would have been understood perfectly by another Valorian. To the humans, it looked like an act of aggression. "Captain, the alien vessel just powered up its weapons," Jiwan reported, her voice sharp. "Weapon ports are opening. Their targeting systems are active." Alarms blared across the Indomitable's bridge. Daehyun felt adrenaline surge through his system as his military training kicked in. He had survived Earth's wars by being faster and more decisive than his enemies. He had seconds to decide whether this was a genuine threat or a misunderstanding. "Lock weapons on their vessel," he ordered. "Prepare evasive maneuvers, but do not fire unless they fire first." On the Eternal Glory, Thexval watched in shock as the human ship responded to his diplomatic gesture by activating their own weapon systems. And not just activating them. The targeting locks that appeared on his sensors were precise, fast, and focused on his ship's most vulnerable points. "Engine cores, shield generators, command bridge, Commander, they have weapons lock," his tactical officer shouted. "They are preparing to fire!" "Impossible," Thexval breathed. "I was only demonstrating readiness. Why would they interpret that as hostile?" Krelith understood in a flash of insight that made his blood run cold. "Commander, they do not understand our customs. What we see as diplomatic strength, they see as a threat. We are seconds from mutual destruction over a cultural misunderstanding." Both ships hung in space, weapons charged, targeting systems locked. Both commanders had their fingers hovering over firing controls. Both crews were prepared to defend themselves. And both sides believed the other had started the confrontation. On the Indomitable, Dr. Minho was frantically analyzing every transmission, every gesture, every word from the alien encounter. His specialty was xenobiology, but he had studied enough anthropology to recognize patterns in behavior, and something about this situation did not match a genuine attack pattern. "Captain, wait," he shouted urgently. "This might not be what it looks like." "Explain quickly," Daehyun said, his hand still on the firing control. Activating weapons during negotiations might be normal for them. Like how some human cultures stand close during conversation while others maintain distance. We interpret the distance differently based on our own cultural norms. The Valorians might see weapon displays as a normal part of serious negotiation. Jiwan shook her head. "That is insane. That is culture," Minho countered. "Captain, if we fire first based on a misunderstanding, we start a war that neither side wanted. Please let me try to communicate this to them." Daehyun stared at the alien ship on his view screen, at the weapons pointed at his vessel, at his own crew waiting for orders. Everything in his military training screamed at him to strike first. But Minho was right. Starting a war over a misunderstanding would be the ultimate failure. "Stand down weapons," he ordered. "Minho, open an emergency channel. Make them understand we misread their intentions before someone makes a mistake we cannot take back." The transmission that followed was desperate and rushed. Minho explained humanity's interpretation of weapon activation as hostile. He begged for clarification of Valorian diplomatic customs. He made it absolutely clear that humans did not want conflict but would defend themselves if necessary. Krelith received the transmission and immediately understood. He turned to Thexval with urgency. "Commander, they thought we were attacking. Their culture interprets weapon activation during negotiation as hostile intent. We must deactivate our systems immediately." Thexval felt shame wash over him. In his arrogance, he had assumed these unknowns would understand imperial customs. He had nearly started a war through his own cultural blindness. "Deactivate all weapon systems," he ordered. "Send a message explaining that we meant no threat. Clarify that weapon displays are part of our diplomatic tradition, not acts of aggression. And schedule an immediate meeting between our command staff and theirs. We clearly have much to learn about each other." Both ships powered down their weapons. Both crews breathed sighs of relief. Both commanders realized they had just learned the most important lesson of first contact. Never assume the other side thinks like you do. "Captain Daehyun," Thexval said through the restored communication channel, his voice carrying what Daehyun hoped was respect. I propose we meet face to face in neutral territory. A shuttle from each vessel midpoint between our ships. We clearly cannot negotiate effectively through view screens and translation software. We must truly understand each other. Daehyun nodded slowly. It was a risk, but the alternative was continued miscommunication. Agreed, Commander. Let us meet as civilized beings should, with open minds and cautious optimism, and let us both be grateful we chose conversation over conflict today. The neutral shuttle hung suspended between the two larger vessels, a small bubble of shared space where humanity and the Valorian Empire would meet for the first time, without weapons or view screens between them. Captain Daehyun checked his environmental suit one final time before stepping through the airlock. The shuttle's atmosphere had been carefully balanced to accommodate both human and Valorian biology, which meant it was slightly uncomfortable for everyone. When he entered the meeting chamber, Commander Thexval was already there, standing with his science officer Krelith. The alien's 4 eyes tracked Daehyun's movements with obvious curiosity, and the human captain found himself equally fascinated. Aliens were real. After 200 years of hiding and wondering, humanity was finally meeting its galactic neighbors. Captain Daehyun, Thexval said, his voice carrying better in person than through the translation software. I must begin with an apology. My actions nearly caused a catastrophic misunderstanding. I assumed your species would understand our diplomatic customs. That assumption was arrogant and dangerous. Daehyun felt some of his tension ease. An alien who could admit mistakes was someone he could work with. The fault was shared, Commander. We also made assumptions. Perhaps that is the real lesson here. We must never assume we understand each other. The 4 beings settled into seats designed to accommodate their different anatomies, and for a moment, there was awkward silence. Then Krelith spoke up, his curiosity overwhelming his diplomatic caution. Captain, I must ask. Your species evolved on this world? He gestured toward the data pad showing scans of Earth. The gravity is extremely high. The tectonic activity is violent. The weather patterns are chaotic. This is what we classify as a death world, and yet you built a civilization there. Daehyun smiled slightly. We did not know any other way. To us, Earth is simply home. Is your world so different? Yes, Thexval answered. The Valorian homeworld has half your gravity. Our weather is mild and predictable. Natural disasters are rare. Most imperial worlds are similarly stable. We deliberately choose such worlds for colonization because they are easier to develop. He paused, his 4 eyes blinking in that pattern Daehyun was learning meant thoughtfulness. I am beginning to understand why your species might have different perspectives than ours. What do you mean? Dr. Minho asked. He had accompanied Daehyun to the meeting. His expertise in xenobiology too valuable to leave behind. On stable worlds, civilization develops through careful planning and gradual progress, Krelith explained. Resources are predictable. Disasters are manageable. There is time to build consensus and follow established procedures. But on a death world, survival requires constant adaptation, quick decision-making, creative problem-solving. Your entire species evolved in an environment that punished rigidity and rewarded innovation. That would explain your stealth technology, Thexval added. May I ask how you developed it? We have been trying to improve our sensor dampening systems for decades with only modest success, yet you managed to hide entire colonies from our best detection equipment. Daehyun and Minho exchanged glances. How much should they reveal? But Thexval had been honest about Imperial limitations. Perhaps honesty deserved honesty in return. We developed it because we were afraid, Daehyun said simply. When we first detected your radio signals 200 years ago, we had just finished fighting terrible wars among ourselves. We knew what happened when civilizations met as unequal powers. The weaker ones suffered either through conquest or exploitation, so we decided to watch and learn before revealing ourselves. 200 years? Thexval repeated, stunned. You have been aware of us for 2 centuries? We have been studying your broadcasts, your ship movements, your expansion patterns, Minho confirmed. We learned your languages, analyzed your technologies, and tried to understand your cultures. Not to attack you, but to prepare ourselves for the day when hiding would no longer be possible. Krelith found himself deeply impressed despite his surprise. That level of strategic patience is remarkable. Most species would have either made contact immediately or isolated themselves completely. You chose a middle path of observation and preparation. Because we were terrified, Daehyun said honestly. Your empire controls thousands of worlds. We control one solar system. If first contact went badly, we had no backup plan except survival. Thexval was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he spoke, and his voice carried a weight of concern. Captain, I must share something with you. Something that could change the nature of our conversation. The Empire is not as strong as it appears from outside. Explain, Daehyun said carefully. 3 years ago, we began exploring a region of space on the far edge of Imperial territory. Thexval said. We call it the Ghost Zone because our ships kept disappearing there. 3 survey fleets have been lost. Not defeated in battle. Simply gone with no distress signals or debris. Something in that region is destroying our vessels, and we have no idea what it is or how to stop it. This was not what Daehyun had expected to hear. You are telling me this why? Because I have been thinking about what your species could offer, Thexval admitted. The Empire has been unified for thousands of years. We have advanced technology and vast resources, but we have also become predictable. Our tactics have not changed significantly in centuries because they worked well enough against every threat we encountered. Until now. You are stagnant, Jiwon said. Speaking for the first time, she had been listening carefully, analyzing everything from a tactical perspective. You have no external competition, so you stopped innovating. Yes, Krelith agreed quietly. The 7 species of the Empire cooperate beautifully, but cooperation can become conformity. We think similarly, approach problems similarly, and when those approaches fail, we struggle to adapt. But humans, Thexval continued, evolved in constant competition, not just between your species and your environment, but between your own nations and cultures. You are used to facing enemies with similar capabilities, which forced you to constantly develop new strategies and technologies. Your paranoid preparation gave you stealth systems we never imagined. What else might your different perspective offer? Daehyun saw where this was going. You want our help with the Ghost Zone? I want to propose an unofficial alliance, Thexval said carefully. Help us understand this threat. In return, I will give you time before the Empire officially discovers your worlds. I will submit a report claiming this sector requires additional surveying due to unusual stellar phenomena. That will buy you years, perhaps decades, before the full bureaucracy of Imperial registration begins. You would lie to your own government? Minyo asked, surprised. I would delay information while exploring all options, Thexval corrected. There is a difference. And, Captain, I must be honest. If you help us succeed against this unknown threat, it will demonstrate your value to the Empire. That will give you leverage in future negotiations. Partner species have more autonomy than client species. Partner species? Daehyun repeated the term carefully. It is a classification that has not been used in 3,000 years, Krelith explained. But it exists in Imperial law. A partner species is recognized as equal in capability and independent in governance. They cooperate with the Empire but are not subordinate to it. Jiwon leaned close to Daehyun and whispered urgently, Captain, this could be a trap. Or it could be the opportunity we have been hoping for, but we need to know more about this Ghost Zone before committing. Daehyun nodded. She was right, but he also understood strategic opportunity when he saw it. If humanity could demonstrate their value to the Empire before formal contact, they would negotiate from a position of strength rather than weakness. And if they could learn more about Imperial capabilities and limitations in the process, that knowledge would be invaluable regardless of how relations developed. Commander Thexval, he said formally, humanity will consider your proposal, but we have conditions. First, we negotiate as equals, not as subordinates seeking approval. Second, you will share all intelligence you have about the Ghost Zone and the missing fleets. Third, any mission into that region will be conducted as a joint operation with shared command authority. Thexval's 4 eyes blinked rapidly, a sign of agitation. Shared command is highly irregular. So is everything about this situation, Daehyun countered. You came looking for an empty sector and found a hidden civilization. We came expecting possible hostility and found potential partners. Nothing about this follows normal procedures. We might as well establish new ones. Krelith made a sound that the translation software interpreted as laughter. Captain, I believe I am beginning to like your species. You do not waste time with false modesty or unnecessary deference. We cannot afford to, Daehyun said. We are one small system facing a galaxy we barely understand. Confidence without arrogance, caution without cowardice. That is how humanity has survived this long. That is what we bring to any partnership. Thexval considered for a long moment, weighing duty against opportunity, tradition against necessity. Finally, he extended one of his long, thin hands in a gesture Krelith had seen humans use in their broadcasts. Then let us shake on it, as I believe your custom suggests. The joint fleet entered the Ghost Zone 3 weeks after the initial meeting between humanity and the Valorian Empire. 2 human vessels, including the Indomitable, traveled alongside 3 Valorian ships, a small armada that represented the first military cooperation between their species. Captain Daehyun stood on his bridge watching the sensor displays with growing unease. Something was very wrong with this region of space. Captain, I am detecting spatial anomalies throughout the area, Jiwon reported from her tactical station. Time dilation effects, gravitational fluctuations, and sensor ghosts that appear and disappear randomly. It is like space itself is unstable here. Commander Thexval's face appeared on the communication screen. We are experiencing the same phenomena. This matches the final transmissions from our lost fleets before they vanished. They reported similar distortions immediately before all contact was lost. Dr. Minho was analyzing the data with intense focus, his fingers flying across his console as he cross-referenced readings with theoretical physics databases. Captain, these patterns are not natural. Someone or something is generating these effects artificially, and the technology required to manipulate space-time at this scale is far beyond either human or Valorian capabilities. So we are dealing with someone more advanced than both our civilizations, Daehyun said quietly. That is concerning. Captain, new contact, Jiwon called out. Multiple objects emerging from the spatial distortions. They are moving to intercept our fleet. The view screen showed dozens of vessels materializing from nowhere, their designs strange and angular. But as Daehyun watched, he realized something odd. These ships had no visible life support systems, no windows or viewports, no heat signatures consistent with living crews. They are automated, he said with sudden certainty. These are not ships. They are weapons, drones or something similar. The automated vessels opened fire without warning or communication. Energy beams lanced across space, striking shields on both human and Valorian ships. But the weapons were not trying to destroy the fleet. They were carefully targeting propulsion systems and weapons arrays, trying to disable rather than kill. They want us alive, Thexval realized over the communication channel, or at least intact. Return fire but aim to disable, not destroy. I want to capture one of these drones if possible. The battle was brief and chaotic. The automated vessels were fast and precisely coordinated, but they followed predictable attack patterns. Jiwon identified the patterns within minutes and began directing the human ships to exploit the gaps. Meanwhile, the Valorian vessels used their superior shield technology to absorb damage while maneuvering into better positions. Working together, the joint fleet managed to disable several drones and drive the rest back into the spatial distortions from which they had emerged. But the victory felt hollow. These automated weapons were clearly guardians of some kind, protecting something in the Ghost Zone. The question was what and why. Bring one of the disabled drones aboard for analysis, Daehyun ordered. And someone find me the source of those spatial distortions. Whatever is generating them is at the center of this mystery. Dr. Minho led the analysis team studying the captured drone. What they discovered was both fascinating and troubling. The technology was ancient, possibly millions of years old, but still functioning perfectly. The automated systems were designed to defend a specific location against any intrusion, but they were also programmed to minimize casualties when possible. These are not weapons of conquest, Minho explained to the assembled commanders during a conference call between ships. They are protection systems. Someone built these to guard something precious, and they programmed them to be as non-lethal as possible while still being effective. Can we communicate with them? Thexval asked. I believe so, Minho said. But we need to approach this carefully. The drones attacked us because we entered their territory without permission or explanation. If we can establish that we mean no harm to whatever they are protecting, they might respond differently. Krelith, who had been studying the spatial distortions, added his findings. I have located the source of the anomalies. There is a massive structure at the center of this region. Artificial, definitely. It appears to be some kind of archive or library, based on the energy signatures. I believe we have found a repository of knowledge left behind by an ancient civilization. Daehyun felt excitement and caution war within him. An ancient alien library could contain technological marvels, scientific discoveries, and historical records of immense value. It could also contain dangers that destroyed civilizations. Both were possible and neither could be ignored. We tried to communicate, he decided. Minho, prepare a first contact package similar to what we used with the Valorians. Mathematical proofs, peaceful intentions, and a request for access to the archive. Make it clear we are seekers of knowledge, not conquerors. The transmission was sent, using the drone's own communication protocols. For long minutes there was no response. Then the spatial distortions began to calm and a new transmission came back. Not words, but images and concepts directly loaded into their computer systems. The artificial intelligence managing the archive was ancient beyond measure. It had been programmed by a species that had ruled a vast empire millions of years ago, but that empire had fallen, destroyed not by external enemies but by internal stagnation. They had conquered everything, achieved every goal, and then found themselves with nothing left to strive for. Their civilization had slowly collapsed from lack of purpose. Before the end, they had built this archive to preserve their knowledge for whoever might come after. They had programmed the Guardian AI to test any species that discovered it, to ensure that only civilizations capable of curiosity and cooperation could access the accumulated wisdom. Within, the previous Valorian fleets were destroyed because they approached with aggressive scanning and showed no interest in communication. Krelith realized. The AI interpreted that as potential conquest behavior and eliminated the threat. But we approached differently. We tried to understand before attacking. We worked together despite being different species. That is what the AI was waiting to see. The AI sent another transmission, this time including a challenge. It would grant access to the archive, but first, it needed to ensure the visitors were truly worthy. It presented them with a scenario, a tactical problem with no clear solution. The scenario placed them in command of a fleet facing an enemy they could not defeat through force. Victory required finding a way to end the conflict without destroying either side. Violence was possible but counterproductive. Negotiation was difficult but necessary. It was a test of wisdom more than strength. Lieutenant Jiwon studied the problem for hours, running countless simulations. Every solution that relied on military superiority failed. Every attempt to force a resolution created worse problems. Finally, frustrated, she tried something different. Instead of treating the scenario as a battle to win, she treated it as a relationship to build. She opened communication channels with the simulated enemy. She proposed mutual benefits instead of demanding surrender. She offered to share resources rather than hoarding them, and slowly, carefully, she found a way to transform enemies into allies through patience and genuine respect. This is the answer, she reported to Captain Daehyun. The test is not about tactics or firepower. It is about recognizing that some problems cannot be solved through force. It is about choosing cooperation over domination, even when domination might seem easier. Daehyun submitted Jiwon's solution to the AI, and the response was immediate. The spatial distortions vanished completely. The Guardian drones withdrew, and the archive itself opened, revealing a vast repository of knowledge accumulated over millions of years. But with access came a warning, delivered directly into the minds of everyone present through technology that transcended language barriers. The AI showed them the history of the ancient empire, how it had conquered species after species, always winning, always expanding, and how that very success had eventually destroyed them. You must not make our mistake, the AI communicated. Your Valorian empire grows dangerously close to the same trap. When you have no equal opponents, you stop growing. When you stop growing, you begin dying. The new species you have discovered, these humans, are your salvation if you let them be. They think differently than you. They challenge your assumptions. They bring new perspectives. Do not absorb them into conformity. Let them remain different. Let them push you to continue evolving. Thaxval understood the warning, and it shook him deeply. The Empire did expect all member species to eventually conform to imperial culture and practices. That had always been seen as a strength, creating unity and cooperation. But the ancient AI was suggesting it was actually a fatal weakness. We will consider this wisdom carefully, he promised the AI, and we thank you for this access to knowledge. It will benefit many species and potentially save countless lives. The AI granted them 3 months to explore the archive and copy whatever knowledge they wished. Then it would seal itself again. waiting for the next species to discover it and prove themselves worthy. But before they left, it gave them one final gift.